Welcome everybody. Thank you for your time joining us at this webinar today. The out-of-home food and drink trends shaping 2025 in association with Bidfood. And we've got Catherine here from Bidfood who's going to run through what those trends are going to be for 2025. And also really pleased to be joined as well by Paul Fitzpatrick from Stonegate. And we're going to have a chat later about what's going on in the world of Stonegate, what they've got planned for 2025, and Paul's sort of thoughts and feelings about what customers are looking for as they go into the new year and beyond. So really, really good session lined up for you guys today. Firstly, I'm just going to say a little bit about UK hospitality and a bit of a look ahead from a sort of fiscal and sort of regulatory perspective. And you may well be thinking, what's that got to do with the price of cheese? We're here to be hearing about sort of food and drink trends, but what I hope to do is just explain a little bit about that sort of context in terms of what we might be seeing in terms of regulation in 2025, the fiscal fallout of the budget, and hopefully that will spark some thoughts about how that sort of wider picture might impact you as a business, your staff, and your customers, and how that might shape what your offer is going into 2025. Against that backdrop, and also what we as UK hospitality are doing about these challenges as well, to hopefully offer a bit of reassurance as well from a sector perspective. So I think I'm moving on then. So yeah, who am I? I'm Jim Cathcart. I'm Policy Director at UK Hospitality. And then moving on to sort of who we are as an organisation, for anyone who may not be aware. So in essence, we're the voice of the sector, to put it very sort of broadly. And what does this mean? So that's talking up the sector to a wide variety of audiences. There's a political engagement piece, so with MPs, policymakers across the United Kingdom, and sort of shaping legislation and a good regulatory environment for us to operate in. And another important strand of our work as well is interpreting those new rules, regulations, et cetera, for a hospitality audience as well. So practical advice, practical guidance for new things coming down the track, as well as sort of existing operational considerations. That's sort of broadly who we are, what we do. And that's, in terms of hospitality, that's everybody. So that's all different sectors, be you restaurant, be you pub, hotel, casual dining, indoor play, the list goes on. And our members range from single site operators all the way up to big companies. So we basically have a place for everybody within our membership and look to represent the sector as a whole. So that's sort of who we are, what we do. Moving on then to what I'll be talking about for this sort of first section, the big one, the budget. Some of the issues coming out of that, which is going to shape 2025 for the sector. Regulation. I'm going to touch on a few things specific to food as well, to link into what Catherine's going to be talking about in terms of the trends coming up, what we're doing as a industry body about all of this. And as I said, just to sort of set the scene a little bit, and hopefully there'll be some useful bits and pieces here to take away in terms of your thinking and planning for 2025. So then on to the budget itself and what it all means. Business rates. So I think this is the big one that we as a sector were united in lobbying for going in. We faced a cliff edge in April where that 75% relief that had been around since COVID times was going to be withdrawn. There's no provision for that. And we pushed for a permanent lower multiplier for hospitality leisure businesses, basically just to give us some certainty, so we weren't trying to fight for temporary reliefs every year. And also the big prize, which is obviously wholesale reform in the business rate system, with our businesses, bricks and mortar businesses, paying well over the odds compared to others, which is, unfair fundamentally. And in the budget, we had reassurance with that reduced rate coming in, which was good news, and also that commitment and consultation on the future of business rates to create a more equitable system for businesses, which all broadly positive. But and it is a big but, we saw national insurance dominate. So on to the next slide. As I'm sure you will all be aware, the headline rate for employer national insurance contributions went up from 13.8 to 15%, which I think is not ideal. Semi-expected they might do something with the rate to a 1 percentage point, 2 percentage points. But unfortunately, the real kicker was around the threshold. So that threshold at which an employer pays national insurance contributions will fall from April next year from 9,100 to £5,000. And in essence, this plus national minimum wage, which we'll come on to, will cost the sector at a conservative estimate overall 3.4 billion a year. So there's 1 billion just off the NICs increases. Combined with the others, it's a massive hit to the sector, because in essence it brings many team members into employer NICs for the first time. And again, conservative estimates, it will vary by business. This threshold change is going to bring, may be 4 times the cost of the new headline rate in itself. So it's huge. It's big. Moving on to national minimum wage. Again, this was sort of telegraphed ahead of time. There's an expectation it would go up, but again, coupled with the NICs shock, adding to that sort of 3 billion plus hit on the sector. Next slide, please. So what have we been saying about this? So hopefully people have seen some of our coverage and putting our members forward. So even in the last couple of days, front page of Sunday Times, I think it was, Today programme. But we've been really making the case for the government to have a rethink around this, really pulling out the impacts on the sector, as they are massive. Political campaigning with our members, so an MP tool to engage with MPs and others around this. So in essence, making a lot of noise around it because it is such a big deal. And at the same time, engaging with those political stakeholders. So letter to the Chancellor signed by our members, really just making clear that this is a massive issue, and grateful for work around business rates. And we understand the government have got a difficult job to do here, but this ain't the way to do it from a hospitality perspective. So we're banging a drum hard on that, and we'll continue to do so on behalf of the sector. And this sort of illustrates, sort of what we do as a body, if you like. Where we've got these big issues impacting the sector, and people remember back to COVID, our work and industry's work around the guidance around that, around furlough and so on. We sort of, that's where the benefits of having one voice really plays through, and we'll be using that to try and, get a rethink here. And in terms of the rethink on the next slide, we can, make a noise about it. That's absolutely fine, but we've also got to come up with solutions to government about this as well. And what we've got a couple here that we're pushing. One around the lower rate for that lower band, if you like, new people brought into NICs and they're not paying the full whack, and an exemption around those working fewer than 20 hours a week. Again, just to mitigate the massive hit that's coming. So that's in play. We're making a lot of noise about it. We're having those conversations, pushing for a resolution for the sector ahead of April 2025. So next on to my sort of journey through 2025, what's coming up, new rules and regulations. So sticking with employment first, again, Employment Rights Bill, centre plank of the new Labour government, again, telegraphed well ahead of time. This wasn't necessarily a shock. And again, illustrate to sort of some of the work that we do around this. We engaged with the Labour guys probably a couple of years before the election, because they'd already, flagged that they were going to look at things like 0 hours contracts. We want to ban on these, and we're like, well, hold up. That straight out ban isn't the way forward, and would impact our sector. So there was that education piece about zero hours contracts, flexible work, how team members, they actually, like these, they benefit people and so on. So those sort of early conversations have led through to, that sort of risk of an outright ban receding. But again, still a lot of work to be doing there. There's live consultations at the moment. Our members talk to us all the time about this. We've got working group going on right now about how we make sure that the detail of these things work for the sector as well, which we feed all the way through to government to hopefully get solutions that work for the sector when the actual legislation comes in down the line. Moving on as well to sort of the food agenda. So healthy eating. We have done quite a bit of work in this space. Companies have been doing a lot of work in this space over the last few years. Be that reformulation, be that portion sizes, and so on. But I think with the newish government, one of their key missions is very much around preventative diseases. Healthier population, if you like, for want of a better term. We've already seen tobacco in the frame for that. So there's pre-existing restrictions around advertising and energy drinks incoming. So as a sector, we've got to be really vocal about what we're doing in this space to government. And again, we've got expert member groups that are plugged into all of this. We're producing some guidance and practical guidance for chefs around healthier menus, about what to do to basically reconsider in the kitchen or try out new things. So you're still creating really, really good menus, but maybe offering more healthy options, that sort of thing. And then another piece of work as well about shouting about what members are doing in this space, because a lot of companies are doing a lot in terms of reformulation and healthier menus, and we just want to tell that story a bit more. So keep your eyes peeled for that as we move into 2025. Next slide, please. Allergens, big one, has been a big one for a while. Everyone will be aware of that. There's a new piece of guidance coming out from the Food Standards Agency about how you communicate this to customers. Again, we're going through that with a fine-tooth comb at the moment with our members to make sure that that's the best piece of guidance it can be for the sector. And we retain that flexibility about how we keep guests safe, and we don't end up with a situation where knee-jerk legislation or anything like that comes in where that could prove problematic. So again, we've got guidance out there at the moment on allergens, but our view is always, advice written by the industry for the industry. We know our businesses, and getting that sort of, the blessing of enforcement bodies, of the FSA on that sort of guidance is the best approach rather than legislation. So allergens, as everyone will be aware, big area, and we're continuing to work on that and make sure we can continue to offer that the safest solutions to our customers that we can. Finally, then just moving on to sustainability. Again, another big focus, and I know we'll be talking a little bit about this shortly. Food waste, always a big area. Provenance, local produce, packaging regulations, deposit return schemes. So there's a lot of legislation sort of coming online in this space soon, some of which directly impacts hospitality, some of which sort of will be on the periphery. But it really just shows you again that from a customer perspective, from a government perspective, that this remains a hot topic through, and it will be through 2025 as well. And again, another area where we recently hosted a seminar on this. We produce advice and guidance tailored to hospitality businesses arising from any new changes in this area. So finally then, just to sort of recap, 2025, we've had the big financial challenge that we're fighting through at the moment, following on from the budget, which is going to have a number of different impacts, which we're looking to mitigate. Regulatory environment, in particular in relation to food. We mentioned employment, but allergens, healthy options, sustainability, those sorts of things are going to be high on the agenda for government, industry, and our customers. And really just to sort of highlight that, as a sector, United Sector is more important than ever in the face of these headwinds, and we'll be making sure for our members will be producing guidance and advice on all the upcoming changes and beyond. So hopefully that wasn't too tangential from the main event, which is coming up now, in terms of food and drink trends, and hopefully gave people some ideas and some thoughts about context when they're looking at 2025 going forward. So then, and I was remiss in not mentioning up front, we will be having Q&A later. There's a little Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. Please do put your questions in there for all of our panelists today, and we'll have some time at the end just to run through a few of those as well. But delighted to hand over to Catherine from Bidfood to say a little bit about herself and run through the trends for 2025. Catherine.
Thank you very much, Jim, and thanks for that really useful overview of the regulatory landscape. Well, good morning and welcome once again. This is our second year sharing food and drink trends for the following year, and we're very excited to bring you the latest release of the food and drink trends for 2025, a culmination of quite a lot of work. We start the process in April, and we've had a lot of fun researching them. Could you move on to the next chart? Thank you. So I'm just going to cover how we come up with the trends, so where they emerge from, some of the drivers that sit behind the trends and influencing consumer choices, talk about the trends. There's a recipe in there as well that we filmed in our kitchen just to bring them to life a little bit. And then the tools and resources that we have available that we'll share through the UK Hospitality website. Thank you. So we every year we collaborate with CGA by Nielsen IQ to do a survey. We've done 2 this year, pretty robust samples, one focusing specifically on food and drink trends with consumers, adult consumers who eat out of home, another on the hot drinks sector as well, because you'll see that one of the trends is hot drinks related. We work with CGA specifically to have exclusive research because, one, we want those trends to be UK specific, and we also want them to be out of home specific, so not in-home trends, so that they are more relevant to our audience and to hospitality. And we back that up with extensive desk research. We put our feet on the street to see how they're manifesting on the high street, really. This year we looked at London and Bristol, which was very much a hotbed, really, of food culture and exciting innovation. So that was a really interesting one to look at. And then our team of chefs, to make these really practical for customers, they come up with recipes for each trends. And you'll see as we go through the trends, the photographs of those recipes, which we've done ourselves in-house too. So yeah, there's a bank of content, inspiration, advice, tools, etc. I'll talk to you about at the end that you can tap into if you're interested in applying any of the trends that we see that are going to be shaping consumer choices for next year. Next chart, thank you. So just a little look at the drivers behind the trends. Whilst the key ones haven't changed, they are still the usual suspects. There have been some shifts and nuances in their relative importance year on year. So you can see that value is still the key factor shaping consumer choice, but it's receded slightly, and things like quality, experience, health consciousness have all really grown. There's even some shift in what value means. Value is more than a low price now. It carries with it the meaning that it taps into other benefits. So value could be something that is good quality relative to the price. It is something that might have a sustainability or a health benefit, something that is worth the cost to people, not specifically just a low price. So these are psychographics that Luminar run on their panel, but we also had a look at some of the emotional drivers that sit within our survey behind the trends, and those include the key ones, as you might expect, actually, when consumers are under a bit of financial pressure: comfort, tradition, reward, and also sharing, which we think taps into value as well. So the sort of drivers you would expect when people are kind of reaching out for things that are familiar, things that are reassuring, when their mortgages and mortgage payments are going up. We also had a look at foodies too. We know that around half of consumers are really interested in trying new trends and innovation when they eat out of home. We also discovered this year that 56%, a very high figure of consumers eating out of home, would describe themselves as a foodie. And when you ask that audience how interested they are in new trends and innovation when they eat out of home, that goes up to 75%. So they are an audience that are worth, a very valuable audience that are worth tapping into. How do you reach them? Well, they tend to read reviews, they tend to come along to foodie events, they go to food festivals, they read reviews of chefs. So they are an audience that are pretty well engaged and easy to communicate with. And yeah, they're online as well, they're digital. So sort of bear in mind the communication aspect of new menus is quite key too. So next chart, please. So without much ado, these are the trends for next year, the 6 key trends. Buns and bowls, flavours less travelled, and within that sits 6 cuisine trends. Closer to home, which is about Scottish, Irish and Welsh cuisine. We've concentrated a lot on English cuisine over the last few years, but consumers are quite interested in widening that. Friendly fibre, which is linked to gut health. Proactive practices, which is what we've called the sustainability trend, because people are looking for actual things that they can leverage. And then Chocolicious, which is one of my favourites. Next chart. Great. So, the cuisines under flavours less travelled that have seen highest interest, both in terms of people already eating them or in terms of they would like to try them, are southern states. So that's southern USA, Cajun Creole, soul food, Turkish and Greek, Argentinian, Portuguese and Swiss. There are a few surprises in there for us this year, but I'll come on to those. Next chart. So if we start with buns and bowls, so this is about the interest and the appeal of next level premium hot sandwiches and nutritious sweet and savoury bowls. And we found that 46% of consumers are interested in either hot or cold premium sandwiches, with a skew towards hot sandwiches. Quite a lot of people are already trying them, but there's about a third of people interested in trying, which indicates a bit of a kind of potential for those. And they're interested in things like loaded fillings, eye-catching layers, explosive flavours, premium hot sandwiches particularly. The likes of Sandwich, which have just Bristol, a brand actually that have opened up in London, are brilliant at this. And you can see amazing photography of their stacked, loaded sandwiches with very premium ingredients like burnt hens, brisket and mac and cheese and so on their website. And then from a bowls point of view, we're talking about bowls that are nutritious ingredients, things like energy bowls, Buddha bowls, smoothie bowls, poke bowls, chia pots. Again, high levels of interest in trying these. And the recipes that you can see that our chefs have cooked up, ginger and garlic and chili tofu Buddha bowl on the right. And then if you flick to the next one, yep, that is a mac and cheese nduja, garlic butter and salami toasty. So again, all those explosive flavors, stacked layers, premium ingredients. Next chart. So onto flavors less traveled, and southern states is definitely one that's rising in popularity. Almost half were interested in trying these, so it had a very high level of overall interest. And we're talking about Cajun, Creole and soul food, so in order of appeal. really flavors from the deep South, Louisiana, Mississippi, authentic flavors, and they tap into the sense of adventure, comfort, and tradition I talked about earlier as emotional drivers. And in terms of ingredients, fresh fish, seafood, humble stews, grab and go options. The recipes you can see on the right: blackened fish, roasted corn, sweet potato sole bowl. If you flick on to the next one, prawn jambalaya, which I'll show our chefs cooking up that recipe actually in a second. Glorious scampi po' boy. Po' boys are those on the go, again, premium sandwiches, so that ticks a couple of trends boxes if you like. And then Creole blackened fish with southern cornbread. So really nourishing comfort foods, but interesting and slightly spicy ingredients. So if we move on to the next slide, we've just got a very short glimpse of that recipe.
Chili, Cajun spices, some oregano, the Holy Trinity, which is onion, celery, and pepper, crushed tomato, stock, and then obviously this beautiful rice.
Delicious. So jambalaya is actually one of the top dishes that consumers are interested in trying, especially for foodies. Why do you think this is, Martin?
I think obviously, you know, a lot more travel these days, and the flavour profile is great for, you know, dinner and, you know, across different menus, different day parts.
Yeah, nice.
So we've got in the celery and the onions in there and the red pepper. So we're just going to cook those off. And then what we're going to do is toast the rice off as well.
Okay.
But to release some of the flavour as well, we're going to add some chorizo in there. So they'll cook slowly with the rice and give that good sort of smoky paprika flavour.
Feelings of like comfort is what like our research tells us.
Are you enjoying yourself there, by the way?
Yeah, so, I need you can go.
All right, bye. So next up, we're going to put in there some of the spices. Do you like chili?
I like chili.
Yeah, so a little bit of flaked chili there.
Yeah.
We've got some Cajun seasoning, some onion powder, and some Old Bay seasoning.
Yeah.
A little bit more paprika, because you'll get some from the chorizo there.
Wow, those smells are amazing.
You like that?
So jambalaya is one of, you know, the top dishes that people are interested in trying, but so is gumbo actually, and I know they have some similarities. So could you tell me what the difference is between gumbo and jambalaya?
Gumbo is normally a stew type dish that's served over rice.
Okay.
So it's a lot less rice within the dish, whereas the jambalaya is the rice is actually part of the dish, a bit like a risotto or a paella. So you actually cook the rice within the dish.
Okay.
Pop that rice in now, just to toast off, just to get some of that flavour going. So all we're going to do now is add some Worcestershire sauce, like that, and then some tomato, vegetable stock, chicken stock. You can make it, you know, you can have chicken. You could add chicken to it as well. And then all we're going to do is just let that simmer away, and that will cook nicely now. So we're back.
Yeah.
We've got our jambalaya here, which has been slowly cooking. There we go. Give that a stir, if you don't mind. Cook off some prawns. So it's all nicely, all the stock's absorbed.
I can imagine this is going to be really filling.
Yeah, nice sort of, I think we talked about it earlier, like that sort of comforty, artsy. What did we forget?
Missing, yeah.
Awesome. Just to fold through, and a smidgen of oregano in there as well. There we go. There we go. And then a little lemon to go on the side.
Prawn jambalaya, everyone.
Jambalaya, lovely.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thanks. Izzy, could you move to the next chart?
We've got.
Super. So some of the other cuisines that that showed highest levels of interest and appeal, a lot of them actually seem to be holiday kind of cuisines, and we definitely feel that there's a sense that people are traveling a lot more back to key holiday destinations, coming back, wanting to try some of those authentic dishes. Greet had a very high level of appeal. overall 79% interest. It's renowned for street food classics like souvlaki, pita breads. It does have similarity to Turkish, which is another of the trends I mentioned in terms of kebab meats and wraps. But it does have a variety of distinctive dishes like the courgette balls and fritters that you can see in the picture. Greek horiatiki salad, as we know as Greek salad, feta cheese parcels, spanakopita, dishes like that. Turkish, next chart. So Turkish, again, very similarly high levels of interest, a hybrid of Mediterranean and Middle Eastern influences, which kind of drive some of the slightly different dishes there. And it's also, again, scores as quite high on traditional and comforting nature of that cuisine. So it taps into the fact that people are reaching out for that at the moment. Great for all day parts, because you've got things like shakshukas for breakfast, pides, which are Turkish pizzas for lunch, street food menus, and then you've got a range of different dishes and stews and soups and as well as kind of mezes and kebabs and pastries, etc. And of course, traditional Turkish tea and coffee. The two dishes our chefs have recreated. Hopefully they'll pop up if you click. Yep, meze and then Turkish pide pizza. Yeah, 41% of consumers are willing to pay more to try this cuisine when eating out. So it's an interesting one that you can work into a range of different day parts. Next up. So there were three cuisines, it's fair to say, that surprised us this time around. Portuguese was one of them. Again, very high levels of interest, some of the highest levels of interest in trying across the whole sample we had. And whilst it's not Mediterranean, it is all about sunshine flavors, again, linking back to the fact people it's a very popular holiday destination right now. Famous for the ubiquitous peri-peri chicken you see on a lot of street corners, and those little Portuguese tarts created by Lisbon monks, pastéis de nata. But there's a lot more to the cuisine, lots of stews, again, mixed fish stew, lots of soups like caldo verde, lots of pot rice dishes, and then rice pudding, which in Portugal's flavoured with lemon and cinnamon. Feijoada, which, like its Brazilian cousin, is a white or black bean stew with pork and chorizo, etc. Again, very much comfort food. On the right, you've got, it's also, like very many Mediterranean countries, has a bit of a heritage of sweet treats. And you can see on the right, one of those amazing range of puddings you can get in Portuguese cuisine. Portuguese sawdust pudding, which is a bit like a deconstructed cheesecake with kind of like cheesy cream and then crumbled biscuits and topped with nuts. And then peri-peri is also a very versatile ingredient, not just for peri-peri fried chicken, but you can use it with chips, potatoes. Our chefs there have created a peri-peri chicken salad verde. So again, very versatile. Next chart. Another one that took us by surprise, again, very high levels of interest in trying Argentinian. Argentinian is, of course, very famous for key ingredients like its steaks raised on pampas grass plains right across Argentina. And in fact, very central to the cuisine are asados, which are those big social events where gauchos traditionally ate some of the cattle that they lived off in big kind of social events where you kind of grill meat on an open flame. Wine too is very popular because of the amazing climate and soil in the foothills of the Andes in regions like Mendoza and Patagonia. But it has a few other interesting and relatively well-known ingredients that are emerging, like chimichurri, the green salsa verde, like empanadas, which make it very good for other kind of day parts, pictured on the right. Dulce de leche, that thick caramel sauce, which is common across lots of South American countries, but particularly used in Argentina. Again, the settlers from Italy and Spain, I think from the early 1600s right the way through, and the Italians from the 1830s onwards, brought with them a number of those Mediterranean sweet treats and dishes. So dulce de leche used very often in shortbread biscuits, on ice cream, in kind of cakes, etc., and cheesecakes. But alfajores are little shortbread biscuits that are sandwiched together with dulce de leche or cream. And they brought with them things like milanesa and polenta even, thinly sliced beef dipped in egg and cooked in breadcrumbs. And on the right, we've got beef empanadas and then a beef and fable burger. And then the other cuisine that absolutely knocked us for six, we were really surprised with this one, was Swiss, and it had the highest levels of interest of any of the cuisines in the survey. Obviously, very few people are eating it. You don't fall over very many Swiss restaurants, even in central London. So we were really scratching our heads as to why Swiss was topping the interest levels. But we think it's because fondue is becoming quite unpopular. Sharing dishes per se are, and cheese and also chocolate fondues are popping up in a range of different outlets, everywhere from pubs to restaurants. Ultimate comfort food at the moment. And then, of course, the ingredients of Swiss cuisine, famously cheese and meats or sausages and onions and potatoes, are very much comfort food that people are looking for now. But there are other dishes as well that work well with day parts that are well known that one might not immediately associate with Swiss, like rostis, great for breakfast dishes, grated pan-fried potato dish on the right. Bircher muesli, again, great for snacks and breakfast, which we know as overnight oats. And then there are a range of other things as well. Leckerli coming into their own, of course, at Christmas as a retail opportunity, sugar glazed ginger biscuits. So that's the flavours less travelled. There are a couple more trends I haven't touched on. Can you move on a little bit? How are we doing for time? Closer to home, I mentioned Scottish, Welsh and Irish cuisine had very high levels of interest. They offer that sense of comfort and also tap into consumers' desire to buy from British suppliers and their need for provenance. But they offer something a bit different to English classics with a twist. The appeal for these cuisines went over and above and beyond their regions, if you like. So they're appealing across the UK. And I think it's partly because there are obviously some dishes that people are familiar with and ingredients. If we move to the next chart, I think I've got a list of those on the next chart. So Aberdeen Angus steak, Scottish salmon, rarebit, potato farls, soda bread, etc. people will know of. But there are also dishes that seem to have very high levels of appeal that certainly were new to me. Stovies, which literally a stew made from the scrapings of roast dinners. Oggies, which are little lamb pasties made with leeks and carrots and potato. Irish coddle, which is bacon and potato and onions and sausage, kind of layered pie, if you like. So there's plenty these cuisines can give you that are not just familiar English classics with a twist. And I think that's why consumers are quite interested in other regions around the UK. Then on to the last two or three trends. Friendly fibre. We mentioned that health trend is really important to consumers, and the majority are considering a variety of plant foods as important for good health and gut health. So I think the messages of Tim Proctor is getting through. And 38% agree that foods naturally high in fibre they disagree that they don't usually taste good. So they are expecting that high fibre foods can taste good. We've got there a roasted beetroot, sweet potato and cauliflower bowl, if you like, covered in oats. And oats are a high fibre complex carbohydrate. The scientists tell us we need to aim for 30 grams of fibre a day. Most of us are getting 20. So there's good opportunity to weave some of those high fibre ingredients into dishes, whether or not you are catering in terms of a duty of care or in the hospitality sector. And consumers are looking for some of these ingredients now as well, whole grain carbohydrates, beans and pulses, etc. And then just touching on with the next chart, the sustainability trend that Jim mentioned. We know that around 3/4 of consumers are trying to lead an environmentally friendly lifestyle, and around the same number are choosing venues and using that to decide where to eat, but it also affects their choices on menus. And we're seeing that. We had a raft of different statistics, actually. More than half will be happy to choose meals made from would-be wasted ingredients, to Jim's point about food waste being on the government's agenda. Carbon reduction and carbon footprint and information is becoming increasingly key for them. They happily pay more for that. Half of them want seasonal produce on a menu. More than half find regenerative agricultural practices interesting, although most admit to not knowing what those are at all. They're certainly interested in dishes from ingredients grown that way. And particularly we found with seafood that the sustainability of their seafood choices, fish, seafood, etc., are very important to them. On the right, we've got a flatbread made from wild farmed flour, which employs regenerative farming practices. And also meat-free is still as important to consumers. So the other recipe shown is, is it shown there? Is a pea and broad bean shakshuka. And the last trend, which is my personal favourite, is Chocolicious. And this has kind of arisen because of the lipstick effect. So when consumers are under pressure financially, they will overlook large financial purchases and when they're not making those, they'll try and treat themselves on a more regular basis. And chocolate is very much in the frame of the way that they're doing that. And this trend also kind of reflects the explosion of innovation we've seen in the hot drink sector. So 81% of consumers see chocolate as an affordable treat and a way of boosting their mood. And they're looking for chocolate drinks, but also small chocolate treats, chocolate desserts, chocolate bars. You're seeing a lot of things like Snickers bars replicated in specialist bakeries in London. When it comes to chocolates, it's different flavored chocolates, white chocolates, different chocolate formats, sprinkles, s'mores, making those look really interesting and over the top. So as well as mochas, they are telling us that they're willing to pay more for a premium drink with exciting toppings. So it's a great way of attracting more spend, really, a great upsell opportunity. And the recipe we've got just is an example of that, hot chocolate with a chai latte floater. So those are the trends, if we move on. We have a range of different resources. We've got an interactive guide that we will share with UK Hospitality, so we can put that on the website. Extensive web content on all of those, 24 recipes and the photography that you can use for inspiration. We feed the content all through the year, linking it to key calendar dates, blogs, podcasts, and we did, particularly for social, we videoed our trips around Bristol and London, looking at some of those Portuguese and Scottish and Turkish, etc., Argentinian places and sandwich. So do look out for those because they're quite fun, but you can see the trends in action there as well. So I think that is it. I'm going to hand back. Thank you very much for listening to Jim and Paul.
Catherine, thank you so much for that.
Listening to Jim and Paul.
Thank you very much for that, Catherine. As usual, now absolutely starving after seeing all of those wonderful foods. And from an operator perspective now, I'm really pleased to be joined by Paul Fitzpatrick, who's Head of Food Development at Stonegate. Welcome, Paul. Do you mind just telling listeners just a little bit about yourself, a little bit about Stonegate before we get into a bit of a chat about what you're seeing out in the market?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, my name's Paul Fitzpatrick. I'm, as you say, Head of Food Development at Stonegate Group. Been in the role for about 7 years. And essentially, in the crux of it, responsible for all things food for Stonegate. We are, just kind of a quick overview of Stonegate, we've got around just shy of 4,500 sites spread across kind of 3 key divisions. So we've got a division of managed sites. We've then got some operator-led ones, and then some traditional kind of leased and tenancies, which take up the bulk of our estate. So we operate across kind of lots of different formats, a few kind of hard brands. Generally, the two biggest ones most people have heard of from Stonegate would be Slug and Lettuce and probably Be It One cocktail bars. But we've got kind of up to about kind of 12 or so formats that we work on kind of behind the scenes.
So big portfolio there, a lot of brands, a lot of, obviously geographic spread as well, Paul. So how are you seeing trading out in the environment at the moment with some of those challenges, potentially upcoming, not there at the moment, but how's sort of trading, how's business on the food front going?
Yeah, I think obviously there's no denying hospitality is a pretty tough gig at the minute. It's a difficult landscape, etc. But I think one of the absolute brilliant things about hospitality is it's such a resilient market as well. So we always find a way. Everybody finds a way. I think in terms of the budget implications, clearly it's going to add costs to, I would say, almost every business within hospitality. I think in terms of NI, that's kind of the biggest impact to us personally. In terms of national living wage, yes, an impact, but actually we're kind of really supportive of this. One, it puts more money in our team's pockets, which is obviously great, but it also puts more money in the wider guest pocket. So actually, whilst it's an impact in terms of a cost, we're hoping that translates into a bit more expendable income for our guests. So yeah, I think impact, yes, but there's some positives to be drawn out of it. We're trying not to be too sort of doom and gloom and actually try and look for the opportunities within that.
Absolutely. And I'm really interested in that point around, customer, how customers might react to it with that, potentially a little bit more spending money. And how do you see sort of shifts in customer behavior at the moment? And what do you sort of think that will do into 2025?
Yeah, I think we've seen some really big shifts in guest behaviour, really probably stemming back from COVID. Huge changes in the way people go out, the times they go out, what they're looking for. I think frequency from our perspective has definitely dropped. People are not going out as often as they used to. But on the flip side of that, when people are going out, they're spending that bit more, they're really treating themselves. The kind of occasion seems to have become even more important, certainly from our perspective. When there's an occasion to go out for, be it a celebration, a big sporting event, then actually people will come out and they'll treat themselves. But it's that kind of, I would say maybe the Monday to Wednesday, Thursday kind of average day of the week that's a bit more of a struggle, I would say, at the moment.
And on that point about people coming out, for the occasion piece, I'm, hearing a lot about this as well from, across the sector, really. Just from a sort of menu perspective, does that impact on how you're actually sort of what you're offering in terms of the food offer then, if people are coming out, for those occasion type elements, or does that impact at all on that element?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's up to us then to kind of gear our menus or different menu offerings to each of those kind of occasions or day parts. So we've done some various exercises across some of our formats where we've segmented bigger formats into kind of smaller menus, just so we can really get to the crux of what the guests want. So it might be that in one part of something that's sat within a bigger format, actually it's really kind of drink-led and a bit more of a social occasion, and we might go a bit more grazing and sharing in that area. Whereas the kind of classic country pub type approach is a lot more about that comfort food and really going big on the whole family approach to dining there.
Interesting. And then of the trends that Catherine's sort of highlighted today, were any of those like a major surprise? Were any of those you were thinking of incorporating into Stonegate? What were your views on the different areas highlighted there?
Yeah, I think a mix of both. Some surprises, I think, as Catherine said, in some of the sort of countries of emerging cuisine, but again, some that you'd expect to be in there as well. I think they apply differently across different businesses within hospitality. So it's kind of a different read you'll take in pubs as you would to if you're in a kind of food to go type market. But I think the overwhelming thing we always try to do with trends is to apply them to what we're already good at. So example of that is we might not take a really classically Turkish or classically Greek dish, but we might take a twist on that and put it onto a pizza that we already do, a burger, those kind of dishes that are really familiar to our guests. Because I think especially in the current climate where money is tight for a lot of people, that actually to go for something they've never ever heard of is a bit of a risk. Whereas taking those flavors and incorporating them into something that guests are already familiar with and understand, people are a bit more willing to try those kind of things.
Interesting. So sort of, just taking it step by step in a way rather than, a total change. That's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that before. And because you've talked there about, some of the innovations, and that's a really interesting one. From a sort of, I guess, practical operational point of view, we've talked about, challenges around budgets, that sort of thing. So what sort of, from a menu perspective, how have you sort of managed that with actually sort of what you're offering, keeping within sort of budgets and potentially increase costs and keeping that sort of lean?
Yeah, I think we are very data led at Stonegate. So obviously everywhere we've got great bits of data from like yourselves, Bidfood, CGA, etc. So we use those kind of big bits of data, but also internally we're constantly looking at what's selling, what's not, what kind of time of the day it's selling. So really looking at all of those. And then taking that data, it's great to have that data, but then translate it into something that actually affects the guests. So we always try and say, put yourself in the guest's shoes and understand from their point of view. Because I think at times it's easy for us to sit and take trends and say, this is what the guest wants without actually ever asking the guests. So I think it's really important that you do that. And ultimately to try and differentiate to everybody else. We're all in a really competitive market. Actually, what can we do to be slightly different? And I think one of the things around there is we try and focus on campaigns, activations, and kind of limited time offers as well. And I think we do this, and it kind of reference back to, I think the absolute market leaders in this are McDonald's. Not very often they change their core menu. The Big Mac has been around for years, but what they do really well is activate on the side of that. So they'll have their special burgers on the side. So we kind of take that approach, and it's great. We can team up with suppliers for joint activations and collaboration. So I think that's an area where we're really looking to in 25.
And for those who, operators who are sort of, here and there looking at it and thinking, oh, God, how do I do that in my pub, my restaurant, whatever it might be, at a sort of small scale? Have you got any sort of tips about how you might sort of start off that process?
Yeah, I think linking back to the trends that Catherine talked about, I think some of them, like I say, some play more into our arena than others, but things like the sandwich example. Historically, we've always had the likes of Pret and the traditional kind of sandwich retailers on the high street, and the difference we've been able to have in pubs, restaurants, etc., is kind of that hot sandwich, as Catherine talked about. So this is a trending area, sandwiches, but what can we do differently to the likes of Pret, etc.? Now, sandwich that Catherine mentioned are an interesting one, because I think they're kind of bridging the gap between the traditional kind of sandwich retailer and then the kind of pub restaurant. They're sitting somewhere in the middle. So actually that's really interesting place to go, and obviously a bit of white space in the middle there they've managed to capture there. I think in terms of how to differentiate, like I said, I've talked about campaigns. I think the two other things for me are try and be as fast to market as you can. Now, I think when you're in a smaller organization, that's probably a bit easier to achieve. In the bigger organizations, you just have to be as fast as you can be. We all know sometimes it takes a little while for sort of bigger ships to turn. And one of the big things I'd say is be really close to your products, fully understand your products, and on the side of that, be really close with your suppliers. I think relationships with suppliers, the likes of Bidfood, etc., are absolutely key to getting the best results for both sides of the coin.
Thank you, Paul. And on that, I'll bring in Catherine here, if I may, as well to sort of join the conversation. Obviously, from Paul, there some really good, valuable insights from an operator perspective. I see we've got a question here, but just before we come to that and we finish for the session, Catherine, did you have anything to sort of flag from what Paul said there?
I mean, he touched on quite a lot of points. I would wholeheartedly agree that you need to look at what's trending and then make sure it's tailored to your offer, what you select, and it's tailored to what your customers want, because every sector, every business, even within a sector, has a very different audience, bunch of consumers with kind of different preferences and needs. So you need to always interpret that. But I think, you know, as well, I would agree. I think we saw last time we looked at Luminar data that treat was one of the top occasions, and we're definitely seeing that still in the market. When people go out, they want to treat themselves, and so it's about looking at what people will pay more for, and what opportunities you've got to upsell drinks, you've got to upsell hot drinks, you've got to upsell sandwiches, and how you can blend something that's a little bit different and that gives you the opportunity to differentiate with those kind of classics that you know are going to be popular and have high rate of sale on the menu.
Thanks, Catherine. Couple of questions here. One really interesting one here for Paul, which I'll come to. First one, though, just around any indications of a positive response to recent lobbying efforts around the budget. I think, being totally honest, still quite early on that front. I think we threw the kitchen sink in it the last couple of days. So they're certainly aware of the level of discontent, and obviously we'll keep pushing that. So as soon as we get a better idea of direction of travel, we'll obviously let people know. But yeah, we'll obviously keep pushing, and thanks for everyone getting behind it. Question for Paul here. What shift have you seen in people moving to a more meat-free diet? And what would you say was the most popular meat-free dish across Stonegate's portfolio?
Yes, would be the answer. We're still seeing people move into the meat-free, vegan, flexitarian approach. I think the flexi bit's definitely really prevalent. We sort of see people dip in and out of these, not necessarily just pure vegans. And we can track that through sort of various different pieces of data collection. It's very similar to low and no alcohol. I think there's the general perception that people are just not drinking anymore, and that's not the case. People are changing their approach and drinking, might be have one alcoholic drink and then a non-alcoholic drink. So very similar to that. In terms of what's most popular, as I said, kind of one of our staple approaches is burgers. We have meat replacement burgers on sort of various different brands. Always very popular. Although the meat replacement bit is plateauing a bit, I think people are opting towards more kind of fresh ingredients at the moment, rather than the kind of a bit more processed meat replacement products. So in that arena, I'd say things like we've got some Buddha bowls, we've got some Mexican rice bowls, poke bowls, that kind of thing. So again, linking back to the buns and bowls trend that Catherine talked about, yeah, I would say burgers and those kind of fresh bowls would be our biggest sellers.
Thanks, Paul. And one very quick final question. Catherine, Chocolicious trends. How is that going to change consumer preferences within the confectionery market?
That's an interesting one. I mean, we were looking at it in relation to hot drinks, but I have definitely seen more chocolate treats in and around London. So, as I said, some of these kind of bakers and specialists like Barnaby doing like their own versions of quite expensive kind of Snickers bars and things like that. So I think you're definitely seeing that in artisan confectionery. I think chocolate's relatively expensive, but there's a lot of I've seen online about the benefits of dark chocolate for the body. I think people like Zoe have got podcasts on the benefits of dark chocolate. So potentially, if people are wanting to treat themselves, they might be going for more premium versions of So I guess it's an opportunity for confectionery suppliers to sort of upsell on the basis of quality and treat and luxury.
So again, back to that treat point, that's very interesting. And then one final one. This is the last one. Paul, Generation Z, a focus for Stonegate? Presumably yes. And what methods do you get? Do you apply to get those guys through the door in 30 seconds?
So I think as I said, it's understanding how they behave. So we kind of said about the low and no alcohol piece. So it's having the right ranges in place for that. Also really important from a kind of digital outreach perspective. So we've got our loyalty app Mixer, which is most prevalent within that age group. And it great ways to interact with them. We build missions where they can go to various outlets, buy certain products, build up points, etc. And that really drives loyalty within that age group, especially. And I think it's important to remember that age group, despite I said frequency dropping on the whole across the market, that demographic is not dropping, particularly sort of urban centric type based within that age group is still going out as frequently, if not growing slightly. So positive.
That's good, because obviously sometimes you hear the narrative, it's that's not going on, but looking at the data, it seems that's that's happening, which is good.
Absolutely.
And good to finish on a positive, as you said earlier. So look, we've come to the end of our time here, and just want to say a big thank you to Paul, big thank you to Catherine, and to you all for tuning in today to listen. There'll be material coming out after this session for you and to share with colleagues who may have missed the webinar today. So just to thank our speakers again. Thank you so much for listening. It's been really insightful, really good session, and catch you in a future session. Thank you. Thanks everyone. Cheers.
Thank you all.
Thanks everyone.
Bye.